Imagine you are standing on the deck of a merchant ship in 1720. The pirate sloop to your port side is 60 yards away and closing fast. Their gun crew is already at the cannon. Then you hear a sound, not the single crack of a ball shot, but a wet, rattling roar, and everything in front of you just disappears. That was Grapeshot, and it was the most terrifying thing the Age of Sail ever put inside a cannon. Before we get into exactly what it did to a human body at 50 yards, let me give you the context that makes this weapon make sense. Naval warfare in the 17th and 18th centuries had a fundamental problem. Cannons were excellent at smashing hulls, punching through wood, splitting masts, sinking ships from a distance. But pirates were not always trying to sink your ship. They wanted to board it. They wanted the cargo. They wanted the crew subdued or terrified into surrender. A cannonball that punched clean through your hull was wasteful. What they needed was something that could clear a deck of fighting men in a single shot. Grapeshot was that thing. The earliest documented use of clustered projectiles in naval cannon dates to the mid-1600s. British naval records from the First Anglo-Dutch War of 1652 describe gunners loading multiple small iron balls wrapped in canvas. By the early 1700s, it had a standardized name, Grapeshot, from the visual resemblance of the clustered balls to a bunch of grapes. The Royal Navy issued formal specifications for it by 1703, and pirates and privateers copied the tactic almost immediately because pirates were not stupid. They learned from the best. If you are learning something new about the weapons that actually shaped history, hit that like button and subscribe. More detail coming that most channels never touch. Here is exactly what a Grapeshot round looked like. A standard naval Grapeshot load for a 9-pound cannon, very common on pirate vessels, consisted of 9 iron balls, each roughly 1.5 inches in diameter, weighing about 1 pound each. They were stacked in 3 tiers of 3 around a central iron rod called the quilted stand, then wrapped tightly in canvas and tied with cord. The finished round was the same diameter as the cannon's bore, so it seated properly. When you looked at it in your hand, it genuinely looked like a small bunch of black iron grapes. Larger cannons scaled up accordingly. A 12-pounder fired 12 balls. An 18-pounder could throw as many as 41 smaller balls packed in a double-tier arrangement. Some improvised pirate loads replaced iron balls with whatever was available. Lead slugs, scrap iron, even jagged chunks of chain, though these were less predictable in spread. The propulsion charge was typically reduced slightly compared to a solid ball shot. You did not need the same velocity to be lethal at close range. What you needed was spread. When that charge ignited, here is what happened in physics terms. The canvas bag disintegrated within the barrel or at the muzzle. The 9 iron balls, no longer constrained, immediately began to diverge. At the muzzle, the spread was still relatively tight, maybe a foot or 2 in diameter. By 30 yards, the pattern had opened to roughly 4 to 6 feet wide. By 50 yards, the sweet spot for deck clearing work, the spread could reach 8 to 12 feet across. Muzzle velocity for Grapeshot from a 9-pounder was approximately 900 to 1,100 feet per second at the muzzle. At 50 yards, each ball was still traveling at roughly 600 to 700 feet per second. That is comparable to a modern rifle round. A 1-pound iron ball at that velocity does not wound a man. It removes limbs. It passes through one body and into the next. This is why naval gunners had a saying, "Grapeshot does not kill a man. It kills the men standing near him too." Pirates were tactically shrewd about when they used Grapeshot versus solid ball. Understanding the difference explains a lot about how pirate attacks actually worked. During the chase, pirates used solid iron ball to try to disable a fleeing ship. They aimed for the masts and rigging. A falling spar or shredded sail slowed a ship more than anything. You did not waste Grapeshot at 200 or 300 yards. The spread was useless at that range. The balls had lost too much energy and scattered too widely to be effective. Once the gap closed below about 100 yards, the calculation changed. Now you were looking at a deck full of men preparing to resist a boarding. This is where Grapeshot became the dominant weapon. A single well-aimed charge fired into a crowded deck at 60 yards could kill or incapacitate 8 to 12 men simultaneously. Historical accounts from Admiralty records and survivors' depositions describe this phase in consistent terms. One moment the deck was full of men, and after a single discharge, only 2 or 3 were still standing. Captain Bartholomew Roberts, also known as Black Bart, the most prolific pirate of the Golden Age, captured over 400 vessels. Survivors recorded that he used Grapeshot as his primary intimidation weapon before boarding. The goal was not always to kill every defender. Often it was to kill enough of them that the survivors lost the will to fight. One Grapeshot discharge was frequently all it took. Larger cannons were not the only delivery system. Pirate ships also mounted swivel guns, small 1 to 2 pound bore weapons mounted on the ship's rail that could be aimed quickly by a single man. These were loaded with Grapeshot almost exclusively. While the main battery punched holes or fired deck sweeps, swivel guns could be traversed rapidly and fired continuously to suppress individual defenders or rake exposed areas of the enemy deck. A typical pirate sloop might carry 4 to 8 swivel guns in addition to its main battery. Combined, they created overlapping fields of fire that were extraordinarily difficult to stand against. The Queen Anne's Revenge, 1718. Blackbeard's flagship was a former French slaver that his crew rearmed with approximately 40 cannons. Contemporary accounts from ships that encountered her described the standard opening move: a broadside that mixed solid ball aimed at the rigging with Grapeshot aimed at the deck, fired simultaneously. The physical and psychological effect was engineered to produce immediate surrender. In most documented encounters, it worked within minutes. Only 2 ships in the historical record actively resisted Blackbeard and survived to tell the account in a court of law. The cowardice of Charles Vane, 1718. The pirate captain Charles Vane lost his command specifically over a dispute about firepower. In November 1718, Vane encountered a large French warship. His crew voted to attack. Vane refused. He had seen what the warship's guns could do and judged the risk too high. His crew voted him out of command for cowardice and replaced him with his quartermaster, Calico Jack Rackham. The historical record is specific. Vane's hesitation centered on the French ship's superior Grapeshot capacity at close range. He understood the math, even if his crew did not. The death of Blackbeard, 1718. The engagement that killed Blackbeard at Ocracoke Inlet is one of the most forensically documented pirate battles in the historical record, because it was the subject of a formal government inquiry. Lieutenant Robert Maynard's 2 sloops closed with Blackbeard's vessel at very short range, under 30 yards, at the decisive moment. Blackbeard's crew fired a Grapeshot broadside that, according to Maynard's own after-action account, killed or wounded a third of his men in a single discharge. Maynard survived only because he had ordered most of his crew below decks before the final approach, anticipating exactly this. The Grapeshot swept the apparent deck and found it nearly empty. What came next was hand-to-hand fighting, and that is where Blackbeard finally died, after reportedly sustaining 5 gunshot wounds and 20 sword cuts. Grapeshot did not disappear with the pirates. It evolved. During the American Civil War, artillery crews on both sides loaded grapeshot and its cousin, canister shot, which replaced the iron balls with a tin can full of smaller lead pellets for exactly the same tactical reason pirates used it, clearing masses of infantry at close range. The slaughter at battles like Antietam and Gettysburg was partly a product of the same ballistic principle that cleared pirate decks a century and a half earlier. The scale simply became continental. Modern military shotgun ammunition and some anti-personnel mortar rounds are direct descendants of the same concept: multiple projectiles, widespread, maximum lethality per unit area at short range. One of Blackbeard's actual cannons was recovered from the wreck of the Queen Anne's Revenge, which was positively identified off the coast of North Carolina in 1996. Conservation work confirmed the presence of grapeshot loads in the gun deck area. You can see recovered artifacts from the wreck at the North Carolina Museum of History in Raleigh. The iron balls are smaller than you expect. They look almost harmless sitting in a display case. They were not harmless. Wild Bill Hickok's ivory-handled Colt Navies gave him an edge in a one-on-one gunfight at 75 yards. That is remarkable. But grapeshot operated on an entirely different logic. It was not a duelist's weapon. It was not about accuracy or speed of draw. It was a weapon that turned a single moment of gunpowder and iron into a catastrophe across an entire space. At 50 yards, across a deck 30 feet wide, 9 iron balls traveling at the speed of a rifle round did not leave room for skill to save you. It left room for nothing. The pirates who used it best understood this completely. They did not use it to fight. They used it to make fighting irrational, to make the mathematics of survival so lopsided that surrender was the only sensible response. One grapeshot discharge was less a weapon of killing than a weapon of certainty. Certainty that if you did not stop and raise your hands, the next 5 seconds would end you. That calculation worked on merchant sailors from the Caribbean to the Indian Ocean for more than 100 years. It shaped how goods moved, how ships were crewed, how navies were funded, and how laws were written, all from 9 iron balls in a canvas bag. If you learned something new today, drop a like and subscribe for more deep dives into the weapons, tactics, and forgotten details of history. Share this with someone who thinks they know everything about pirates. They do not know this part.